Assalamu alaikum. This is our lecture number 16 of Global Business Management. The topic of today's lecture is Global Monetary System. We have three learning objectives of this lecture. The first learning objective is to understand the role played by the global monetary systems in determining exchange rates. The next learning objective is be familiar with the historical development of the modern global monetary system. And the third learning objective is to appreciate the differences between a fixed and a floating exchange rate systems. Okay, before we start with our today's lecture, we have to do a quick recap of last lecture. The first point that we discussed in the last lecture was the law of one price. Law of one price, which states that in a competitive market, in a competitive market where there is some efficient market where there is no trade restrictions, no transportation cost, the price of one product should be the same across the countries. We had discussed the example of one pair of jeans, that if that pair of jeans is available in Pakistan with the price of 1,000 rupees, when we convert this 1,000 rupees into the dollars, it would be the $10. That jeans should be available in USA with $10. If the price of that jeans would be higher in USA, that means the exchange rate should be reconsidered and revalued. But according to the law of one price, it should be the same across the countries. Okay, and in the continuation of law of one price, there is another concept which is called purchasing power parity, which states that the basic goods which are required for the daily life should be same across the countries. This is called the price of baskets of goods. Should be roughly the same, but the difference between the first law of one price and the purchasing power parity is law of one price has the assumption of efficient market where there is no trade barriers and no trade impediments and no transportation cost, while in purchasing power parity has the underlying assumption of a relatively efficient market. Relatively efficient market is a market in which few impediments to international trade and investment exists. After this thing we had discussed about the international Fisher effect, which states that any of two countries, the spot exchange rate should change in equal amount but in opposite direction to the difference in nominal rates between two countries. Okay. Beside this thing, we had discussed about there are three factors that impact on the exchange rate. The first of all, the price. The next one is the interest rate, and the third is the bandwagon effect. The first one was the price. How price affect on exchange rate? It states that when a supply of money money within the currency within the country increases, people get more money in their hand, the demand will increase of that product. If the supply of money and the supply of products are not at the par and not on the same level. But the important thing is when the supply is higher as compared to the products, then demand will be higher and cost will be higher, the price of those goods will be higher, and ultimately the inflation will increase. When the inflation will increase, the exchange rate automatically will depreciate of that country. So we can say that the prices has inverse relationship with exchange rate. That's if the prices go up in the country, the exchange rate of that country will go down, it will depreciate. On the other hand, we can see we can see this relationship in this way, that when the prices of that prices within that market are increased, the cost of export will be increased as well. We can see the cost, the level of export will go down, because the people, the countries or firms who are buying those products from that country will feel that the cost is higher. They have to pay more money to buy those products because of the currency depreciation. Because the currency depreciate, and because of this thing, the overall trade balance will be disturbed. And the next thing we have seen, this thing, the inflation. When the price is higher, when the inflation is higher, the investor will demand higher interest rate because of this uncertainty, because of devalue of their investment. They will demand the higher interest rate, and when the interest rate will be increased, the exchange rate, the interest rate, and the important thing is, which is the underlying the international Fisher effect, when the interest rate, the real interest rate should be the same across the countries. Otherwise, the important thing is arbitrage will occur across the countries. If in one country the rate of interest is lower as compared to another one, people start taking the loan, taking the money from this country and start investing in another one, and so when what will gonna happen, the demand of that money will increase in country A. Like for instance, we take the example of USA and France or Germany. If the rate of interest in France, in Germany is 5%, and in USA it's 10%, the investor will start taking the loan in euro in France, in France, and start investing in USA, because the rate of return is higher in USA, and the amount, the borrowing amount, it's more cheaper to borrow from the France. Later on, with the passage of time, what's going to happen, that the demand will increase, in demand of that euro will increase in France, okay, and supply of dollar will increase in USA. So when the supply will increase, the interest rate will go down. When the demand is increased, interest rate will go up in France. It will increase from 5% to upward, and in USA, when the supply of dollar will increase, the rate of interest will go down, and in France it will go up until it will be it comes to the same level. Okay, the last one that we have seen was the bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect was the effect that the part of the traders turn into the self-fulfilling practices, and the traders can join the bandwagon, and if one person is doing something, everybody is going to follow that person, and they are going to, when the investors are doing this sort of thing, they start buying one product, one currency, then automatically in the market there will be some impression that the rate of that currency will go up and down. That's how, because of the investor psychology, the psychology rate will be changed. There are two types of school of thoughts about the forecasting decisions, that firms, whether the firm has to take those services and invest that money in getting those services is right or wrong. Okay, the first one is the efficient market school of thought, which argues that the forward exchange rate do the best possible job for forecasting future spot exchange rate, and therefore investing in forecasting services would be the waste of money. On the other hand, inefficient market argues that the companies can improve the foreign exchange market estimate a future rate by investing in foreign services. If we see this efficient and inefficient, efficient says that the foreign exchange rate represent the information of the market in the best way, so the companies don't need to hire the foreign services or demand or invest money for the forecasting services. On the other hand, an inefficient market argues that the market exchange rate does not reflect the exact exchange rate. So they have to take the forecasting services. These are two different opinions and contrasting opinions. Okay, how the forecasting happens? There are two ways. The first of all, the fundamental analysis. The second one is the technical analysis. Fundamental analysis is based on the macroeconomic variables. The companies, the investors, these people will going to see the macroeconomic variable like the supply of money, the interest rate, the balance of payments, and the monetary policy and inflation rate and the other things. They are going to see the macroeconomic variable, then they are going to predict the interest rate and predict the exchange rate. On the other hand, the technical analysis, what they do, they are going to just observe the trends of the previous trends, how and when it happens, when the currency fluctuated, and they are going to predict for the future one. Okay, the next is the currency is freely convertible. There are three sort of environments where we are going to see about the currency conversion. The first one is freely convertible, the next one is externally convertible, and third one is non-convertible environment. Freely convertible, in a freely convertible environment, the residents and non-residents are freely open. They are free to convert the money, the local currency, into the foreign currency. In externally convertible environment, only the non-residents are allowed to convert the local currency into the foreign currency. Non-convertible situation is when resident nor the non-residents are allowed to convert the local currency into the foreign currency. These are three different sort of currency environments. Why countries stop this thing, stop buying or prohibit from converting their holdings of domestic currency into the foreign? Because when people are residents or non-residents, collectively when they start buying the foreign currency, it disturbs the supply of money, the domestic money, domestic credit, domestic supply of money in the market. And we have seen this thing, when the supply of money is increase or decrease, it directly affect on the interest in the inflation rate, the prices, and it also in fact on the interest rate. So which ultimately all these things lead to the change in exchange rate. So the countries, the governments have strict policies about this sort of conversions. Next thing, what the managers can do, they can buy forward, they can use swaps, a lead or lag payable or receivable. These are the different tactics they can apply to control the foreign exchange some risks. Okay, the lead strategy is the attempt to collect the foreign currency receivable early when a foreign currency is expected to depreciate, and pay foreign currency payables before they are due when a currency is expected to appreciate. When the managers see this thing, the currency is going to appreciate, is going to depreciate, they can collect the foreign currency receivable early. And when they see this thing that they are going to appreciate, they can the currency payable, they can pay early. Lag strategy, they can delay the collection of foreign currency receivable if the currency is expected to appreciate, and delay the payable if the currency is expected to depreciate. But the important thing with these strategies, with the lead and lag strategy, is that it's really difficult to implement, because there will be a conflict between the managers of the different companies across the countries. When both of them are going to follow one is going to do the lead strategy, might be another one will prefer the lag strategy. That would be conflict and difficult to implement. Okay, we let's start talk about the international monetary system. What is the meaning? That's a really interesting topic, and I hope that and it's more pertinent to our topic on international business. International monetary system refers to the institutional arrangement that countries adopt to govern exchange rate. This is the mechanism or system through which exchange rates are determined and controlled. Okay, this is a monetary system, international monetary system across the. Considering we are talking about the exchange rate, they deal with across the countries, currency of different countries. The first way is the Floating exchange rate system, first system, exists when a country allows the foreign exchange rate market to determine the relative value of the currency. In the floating exchange rate, other countries are free to determine the price of any other foreign currency by the market forces. For instance, the US dollar, the main important currencies are the US dollars, the euro, and the pound, Japanese yen. These are the important currencies, and they float freely against each other, and their values are determined by market forces and fluctuate day by day. Even in fact, within the day, they can change within moments, within minutes. They change. The rate of change with each other, across each other, against each other, it changes very quickly. Okay, another system, exchange rate system, is the pegged exchange rate system. It also exists when a country fixes the value of its currency relative to a reference currency. Many Gulf states peg their currency to the US dollar. It happens like this, that some countries peg mean fix. Somehow they fix it. They fix it with some currency, one currency, and most of the countries, like that's mentioned, that Gulf countries, they fix their currencies, their real or something, with the dollar. If the dollar go up, their currency will go up. When the dollar go down, their currency will go down. That's how they peg it. They can peg with certain rates. It might be they fix some exchange rate initially with the dollar. Then after that, if the dollar go up, they will go up, and with the same proportion, with the same exchange rate. Okay. Another system is a dirty float exists as well. When in dirty float, a country tries to hold the value of its currency within some range of a reference country such as the US dollar. In dirty floating, what it happens, it's not like a pegging. It's a country defines its ranges, the minimum maximum range. Like US dollar stays with the amount of 100, and a country can decide that, for instance, if we talk about the Pakistan, though we don't have the dirty float system, we have free market, and in dirty float they can define that Pakistani rupees can fluctuate between 98 to 102, not less than this, not greater than this, in between this bracket. And a very famous thing is about China. China pegs the yuan to a basket of other currencies. That's a big objection of US, and Obama has raised this concern several times, that the China intentionally keep the value of the currency low compared to other countries to attract the foreign investments. This is their accusation. They always accuse China about this thing. Okay, the another system is a fixed exchange rate system, when countries fix their currencies against each other at certain mutually agreed on exchange rate. I mean, in this exchange system, it's for instance, if we have $1 is equal to 100 rupees in fixed, whatever happens, it will remain 100 rupees. $1 is equal to 100 rupees. Whatsoever happen within the country and across the globe, whatever happens, it will remain the same. And we will discuss about it a little bit later, and how it remains same, and what are the conditions in which it can change. Okay, another system is a European monetary system, which was before the 1999. Okay, what was the gold standard? We start with the gold standard, referred to the system in which the countries peg their currency to the gold and guarantee their convertibility. The gold standard dates back to the ancient time, when gold coins were the medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value. Payment for import was made in gold or silver. Okay, guarantee their convertibility. Okay, in gold standard is a system in which currencies peg their currency to a gold and guarantee their convertibility. Okay, what they used to do is that they keep the gold, the countries following the gold standard. Following the gold standard, they keep the currency with them, keep the gold with them, and they print currencies according to the level of gold, amount of gold that they have. They cannot print, they cannot float more currency, more notes of the currency, more than the amount of gold or the worth of gold that they have. And they have to determine their exchange rate, the value of their currency, on the basis of the amount of gold that they have. And the country A and country B is going to do the same thing, country C is going to do the same thing, and then they are going to compare the currencies with each other, and they are going to define the rate with each other, what will be the currency rate with each other. An important thing is, if someone demands the gold against the that currency note, they will be allowed to get the gold as well. That was, and this is the system. In the beginning, like we know this thing, that in the beginning people use the gold coins or silver coins instead of these notes, and because of this note system, later on they converted from this gold and silver coins to notes, because they felt that it was really difficult for them to, if they are doing some trade across the countries, and companies are engaged in international business in other countries, it was very difficult for those companies to ship all that gold payment or payment in silver to the another country. Like imagine a scenario that what we have nowadays is just the transfer is one click away. They just click the button, and transfer is done. This payment is done. And in contrast, imagine a scenario that if the company have to pay in gold or coins in USA. It was really difficult. I mean, Pakistan to USA, or we can take the example of Pakistan to Australia or Japan. That would take several days to make the payment. And imagine the level of trade we have across the globe. It could be really difficult to manage in physical, tangible coins. Okay, later payment was made in paper currency, which was linked to a gold at a fixed rate. In the 1980s, the most nations followed the gold standard, and according to this, $1 was 23.22 grains of fine pure gold. That was determined. The rate of $1 was determined as 23 grains of fine gold. Gold par value refers to the amount of a currency needed to purchase 1 ounce of gold. The gold par value refers to the amount of a currency needed to purchase 1 ounce gold. This is the basic thing. Okay, how the two different currencies, this is the first thing is how they define the value of their own currency within the country. The second thing is every country done this thing, and now the second thing comes to the point that how two different currencies will be convertible with each other on the basis of this criteria. The British pound was defined as at the same time. British pound was defined as containing 113 grains of fine gold, and 1 ounce of gold cost $4.25 pound, which is 480 divided by 113, because since there are 480 grains in 1 ounce, so $1 1 pound is equal to $4.87. How it's like this? Because to buy a 1 ounce of need to buy 1 ounce of gold. To buy 1 ounce of gold, how much money is required in dollar and in pound? That's the simple thing. In US dollars, to buy 1 ounce of gold, it requires 20.67 US dollars. and in pounds it requires 4.25 pounds, and we just convert with each other, and the exchange rate would be 1 pound is equal to 4.87 US dollars. यानी 1 ounce of gold को परचेज करने के लिए हर कंट्री ने अपना अपना एक रेट फिक्स कर लिया है. अंडर वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द गोल्ड स्टैंडर्ड, और हर कंट्री का डिफरेंट है. एक यूएस के अंदर 1 ounce ऑफ गोल्ड परचेज करने के लिए 20.67 US डॉलर रिक्वायर्ड है. ब्रिटेन के अंदर 4.25 पाउंड रिक्वायर्ड है, and so on. And when they want to convert with each other, they just divide with each other and they get the exchange rate. Okay, काफ़ी अच्छा. That was a really good gold standard, was a good exchange system, and it looks good, and because it was backed by the gold, looked really sound. The great strength of the gold standard was that it contained a powerful mechanism for achieving a balance of trade equilibrium by all countries. It's saying that it provides a balance of trade equilibrium. How? When an income of a country's residents earn from its export is equal to the money its residents pay for imports. ठीक है? A strength of a gold standard is like this: a country is said to be in a balance of trade equilibrium when the income is residents earn from export is equal to the money its residents pay for the people in other countries for imports. It is this feature that continues to prompt calls to return to a gold standard. Important thing is the strength of this gold standard is the country always the country remains in the balance of trade equilibrium when the income when the resident earn from its income from where they are getting the income from the export, whatever they are selling to another country, and to equal to this amount whatever they are selling to another country, and they are making the money that should be equal to the money that they are spending in buying things from the other countries on import. The amount they spend on importing the things should be equal to the amount that they spend on sending the things, exporting the things. It should be the money they get from the export should be equal to the money they pay for imports. It should be equal. Okay, now there is a hypothetical situation where we can see how the trade of balance of trade occurs in gold standards, and why and how this standard is really strong. Hypothetical situation is that there are only 2 countries in the world, the Japan and the USA. Imagine Japan's trade balance is in surplus, they are doing more export because it exports more to the US than imports. That's why we are saying this is surplus. Japanese exporters are paid in US dollars, which they exchange for yen at Japanese bank. When the Japanese are doing exports, of course they are paying and they are getting money. They are getting money from the US because they are only, just imagine there are only 2 countries. The money that they are receiving from the US market is in US dollars. They get the US dollars, they come to the banks and they get they deposit their US dollars into the bank and get yen against those US dollars. Okay, Japanese bank collect those US dollars from their investors who are doing the exports, okay, and collect all those dollars and pay yen to those exporters. And what they do, they collect all those dollars with them, and then what they do, they submit these dollars to the US government and demands payment of gold in return. In any case, it happens like this, that they're collecting all the dollars from the exporters, and then they talk with the US government that we have this amount of US dollars with us, and you have to pay us the gold against this US dollars. When Japan has trade surplus, Okay, we are considering that situation where Japan is in surplus. There will be a net flow of gold from US to Japan. Okay, these gold flows automatically reduce the money supply in, okay, because of this surplus, gold is coming in the Japan. Okay, because these gold flow automatically reduce the money supply in US and swell Japanese money supply. What is going on? In fact, because of this thing, the gold flow, because of this thing that US dollars are coming in and they are getting the more yuan more yen in the country, and because within the Japanese economy, the amount or level or supply of yen is increased. And in USA, what happened in USA? The supply of dollars, because all the dollars are going to the Japan, all these dollars are going to the supply of dollar is reduced in USA and supply of yen is increased in Japan. So prices would be higher in Japan because the supply is increased, prices will increase, and in USA supply of money is down, and because the supply of money, the prices will go down. The rise in prices decreases the demand of products in Japan, and while the decrease in prices in USA will increase the demand of products. Thus, Japan will start buying from USA, and USA start buying less from Japan because how it happened. Supply of yen is increased. Because the supply of yen is increased, demand is increased, and overall inflation has increased because the prices increased. Because the prices increased, what happened? People who were buying more from the Japan start buying more, and people who were buying, the US was buying, US will stop buying, or they will reduce the buying from the Japan because the prices increased. On the other hand, because the supply of dollar was decreased in the US market, okay, prices go down, demand will go down, the prices will go down, and because the prices are low, Japanese people start buying from the USA. And so they will continue this process until the balance of trade equilibrium is achieved. That's how, and that's why they say that the gold standard was most stable system in the world. Okay, why did the gold standard make sense? The gold standard worked well from the 1987 until 1914, but many governments financed their World War I expenditure by printing money and so created inflation. People lost confidence in the system, demanded gold for their currency, putting pressure on the country's gold reserves and forcing them to suspend gold convertibility. That was an important thing, because the most important thing is that was a period, that was the era of the First World War, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the market, and because of this uncertainty, the first thing is that the countries were spending more money rather than they are generating the money through their system, like tax collection or something. What they were doing, they were collecting money, they're just printing the money, and they were spending that money on the war. That was the first reason. The second reason was because of that war, the uncertainty in the market was high, and because of that uncertainty, the people were demanding their gold against their currencies, what they keep. And that's why the government put the suspension on gold convertibility within their economies. Because they don't have that much of gold reserves, and they couldn't provide everybody the gold, which is the currencies which are backed by the gold. Okay, by 1939 the gold standard was dead because of these huge things. Okay, after World War I, heavy expenditure affected the value of dollar against gold. US raised dollars to gold from 20.67 to $35 per ounce. And before it was, okay, $1 is equal to 4.87. After devaluation, it became $1 is equal to 8.25. Intentions was to increase the export and decrease the export by devaluing the dollar and to create jobs. Other countries followed suits and devalued their currencies as well. A key problem with the gold standard was that there was no multinational institution. Okay. After the World War I, the problem was that U.S. raised dollars to gold from $20.67 to $70.35. To the main intention why they did this thing, they devalued their currency because they wanted to increase the export and decreases export, increases the import and increases the export and decreases the import by devaluing the dollar and to create jobs. But the problem was at the same time other currencies started to depreciate their currencies as well for the same purpose, to attract the investors for export, and they were doing the same thing to create the jobs within the economy. But the net effect across the globe was the negative. When every country is doing the same, was doing the devaluing their currency, then the investors was indifferent of going to those countries because they can get that opportunity in everywhere. So this mechanism of devaluing their currencies to get the more export and get the jobs was not functional at that time. The key problem with the gold standard was that there was no multinational institution that could stop countries from engaging in competitive devaluation. That's an important thing. Because USA did devalue their currency, then all the other countries devalued their currency as well. And because at that time there was no overall international financial institutions which could stop them from competitive devaluations. Okay, in 1944, representatives from 44 countries met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to create a new international monetary system that would facilitate post-war economic growth. Okay, World War II के बाद they sit together and at Bretton Woods, and they were thinking to develop international monetary system. And they made, these countries from 44 countries, they made representatives of the 44 countries, they made the agreement. Under the new agreement, a fixed exchange rate system was established. All currencies were fixed to gold, but only the US dollar was directly convertible to gold. Okay, devaluation could not be used for competitive purposes. A country could not devalue its currency by more than 10% without IMF approval. These are the four important things that they made. They made fixed exchange rate in the Bretton Woods system. In the Bretton Woods in 1944, they developed a fixed exchange rate system. Fixed exchange rate, before it was that every country has to maintain a gold reserve against its currencies. But now what's going to happen? Every currency is going to fix their exchange rate with dollar, and only dollar is going to be backed by the gold. That's because of scarcity of the gold. It's not possible for every country around the world to maintain the gold against their currencies. This was the first thing, and next thing is competitive devaluation will not be allowed. And if some country wants to devalue its currency, then they cannot devalue more than 10%, and even they have to do this sort of devaluation with the permission of IMF. Okay, Bretton Woods Agreement also established two multinational institutions. The first one is the International Monetary Fund to maintain order in the international monetary system through a combination of discipline and flexibility. And the second one is the World Bank to promote general economic development, also called the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Okay, there are two things with this Bretton Woods Agreement. The first one is because of they established the fixed exchange rate. The next thing is with this meeting, what they did, they established financial institutions. The first financial institution was the IMF, International Monetary Fund, to maintain order international monetary system through a combination of discipline and flexibility, because they have seen the competitive devaluation in the countries, and to stop this sort of behavior in the future, they have developed the International Monetary Fund. The next one is they develop a fund, a bank, a World Bank, to promote general economic development in countries which are destroyed or which are severely affected because of the World War II. Okay, International Monetary Fund articles of agreement was heavily influenced by the worldwide financial collapse, competitive devaluation, trade wars, high unemployment, hyperinflation in Germany and elsewhere, and general economic disintegration that occurred between the two world wars. The aim of IMF was to try to avoid repetition of that chaos through a combination of discipline and flexibility. Okay, there are several purposes with this IMF. The first one is the fixed exchange rate spotted competitive devaluation and brought stability to the world trade environment. The next one is the fixed exchange rates imposed monetary discipline on countries, limiting price inflation. In cases of fundamental disequilibrium, devaluation were permitted. IMF lent foreign currencies to members during short period of balance of payment deficit, when the rapid tightening of monetary or fiscal policy would hurt economic employment. Okay, the main purposes of this foreign exchange rate of this IMF was to stop countries in engaging in competitive devaluation. There will be a strict monitoring for inflation, and the third one is if they need to do the devaluation, they have to do it with the permission of IMF. And in addition to these things, IMF will provide some sort of short-term loans to its member countries to meet the trade deficit, and when a rapid tightening of monetary or fiscal policy would hurt domestic employment. Okay, and the second institution which was established because of this Bretton Woods meeting, that was the World Bank. World Bank countries can borrow from the World Bank in two ways. The first one is the money is raised through the bond sales in the international capital market. Borrowers pay a market rate of interest, the bank's cost of funds plus the margin of expenses. The next way how the World Bank is going to raise the money is through the International Development Agency, an arm of the bank created in 1960. IDA loans goes only to the poorest countries for their development and infrastructure projects. Why did the fixed exchange rate system collapsed? The fixed exchange rate system, which was developed in the Bretton Woods in 1954, that collapsed that lasted and functioned well till 1960. It collapsed when a huge increase in welfare programs and the Vietnam War were financed by increasing the money supply and causing significant inflation. Because in the late 60s there was a trouble for the USA, USA was directly involved in Vietnam War, and they have the unemployment within the country, and what the President Johnson, what he intended to do is they increased government spending, which was not backed by taxes, rather printing the money. So inflation rose from 4% in 1966 to 9% in 1968, and the overall import level of USA was higher during that period, and the balance of trade was disturbed. Because of this, main important thing is to finance their war expenses and to provide the welfare benefits to their residents. The President Johnson, he's just ordered to print the money and meet those expenses rather than generate those revenues from that, generate that capital, that money from the tax revenue. An important thing after in spring 1971, US trade figures were released. That was the important point, that the USA was released their trade overall position, to what extent they are doing import or export. It was the first time since after the World War II that level of import was higher. In Germany, what happened, because the level of export were increased in the USA, in Germany speculators made massive purchase of the Deutsche Mark because they believed that the US dollar is going to devalue, and the German Deutsche Mark is going to be revalued against the US dollar. Because important thing was that when the US released their trade position, their export was lower than the import, and because of this thing that the import was higher, the investors in the France and in Germany, and particularly in Germany, they started to realize that this fixed exchange rate between the US dollar and their own currencies are not at appropriate level, and they have to reconsider. And because of these speculations, these investors starting to buy the Deutsche Mark, and only if we talk about that, they believe when the German investors starting to buy the Deutsche Mark, what happened, that the supply of Deutsche Mark was decreased in the market, and because of this decrease in the market, the rate within the rate of Deutsche Mark within the German market was increased. And in order to stop this thing, in order to meet this thing there and keep the exchange rate with the US dollar steady, what the government did, the German government starting to buy the dollars. And within it is very famous thing that on the May 4th, 1971, on the early morning, the German central bank, they bought $1 billion US dollars from the German market to keep the balance between the supply of dollars and the supply of the Deutsche Mark within the economy, to keep that exchange rate steady at the same level. And the very next day, on the 5th of May, they did the same thing again. They bought another $1 billion US dollars from the market, and in order to keep the exchange rate on the same level. But on the 6th of May, they observed that still the US dollars was going down, and then what they did, the German central bank, they allowed their markets to decide freely the value of the dollar against the Deutsche Mark. That was the first time when these currencies were floating freely against the US dollars. And because of this thing that the US dollars was speculative attack. And the important thing is, Bretton Woods system could not work if its key currency, the US dollar, that was the essence of this system. This system couldn't work if the main important currency was the US dollar. If the US dollar were under speculative attacks, it works well only as long as US inflation rate remained low and US did not run the balance of payment deficit. Exports should be lower than the imports. Other countries did not want to devalue the US dollar since it makes their products more expensive relative to the US products, And so in March 1972, countries like EU and Japan allowed their countries float against the dollars. And this was a point when they have to sit again in Jamaica, and they made agreement in 1976, and this is new, and they developed a new exchange rate. And what was the rules under these new agreement? The rule under the Jamaican agreement, the floating rates were declared acceptable. Gold was abandoned as a reserve asset, which was only backed by the US dollar was backed by the gold reserves. Total annual IMF quota was set. The amount member countries contributed to the contributed to the IMF were increased from $41 billion to today they were about $300 billion. Okay, since 1973, the exchange rate have been more volatile and less predictable than they were between 1945 and 1973 because of 1971 and 1979 oil crisis, the loss of confidence in the dollar after US inflation in 1977 to 78, the rise in dollar between 1980 and 1985, the partial collapse of the EMS in 1992, and the next one is 1997 Asian currency crisis, the decline in the dollar from the 2001 to 2009. These are the different incidences that what happens after when the floating exchange rate system was introduced. There were several incidences, several economic situations occur because of that. The US dollars have been devalued. They have mentioned about the oil crisis, because of the oil crisis and because of the high inflation during certain period of 77 to 78 in the USA. Then the 1997 the Asian crisis happened, and decline in the US dollars from 2001 to 2009 because of the emergence of other countries. Okay, this is the graphical pattern of fluctuation of US dollar as we have discussed in 1973. Index, it is an index value, and it increased in 1983, and continuously going up mean dollar is stable, going down mean the value of dollar is going down. And as we can see, since 2001 it's going down, and the value of dollar is decreased less than the 80 point. Now the question is, which is better, floating exchange rate or the fixed exchange rate? Monetary policy, okay, under floating exchange rate, monetary policy is independent. You don't need to peg or align your monetary policy with the US or international policies. Okay, removing the obligation to maintain exchange rate parity restores monetary control to a government. Okay, before they have to, under the fixed exchange rate system, they have to maintain that exchange rate, and in order to maintain that exchange rate, they have to change the monetary policy according to achieve that exchange rate. And in a way, your monetary policy is controlled by that exchange rate system or the externally. The next one is automatic trade balance adjustment. Under Bretton Woods, if a country develops a permanent deficit in the balance of trade that could not be corrected by the domestic policy, IMF would have to agree to a currency devaluation. Okay. The second thing is, under the floating exchange rates, the balance of trade occurs automatically. While if we consider on the other hand, in the fixed exchange rate, if there is a balance of trade is not there, the country have to take the permission from the IMF, and IMF would have to agree to the currency devaluation. They couldn't even do the devaluation by themselves. But a fixed exchange rate system, in a fixed exchange rate system, provides a monetary discipline. These are the benefits of the fixed exchange rate. Provides monetary discipline, ensures that the government do not expend their money supplies at inflationary rate, minimizes speculation because it's already fixed. They reduce uncertainty, again because of fixing of with the US dollar, there was less speculation and less uncertainty. And it promotes growth of international trade and investment. Okay, which type of system is better? Because of the volatile nature of the floating exchange rate system, there has been renewed interest in the fixed exchange rate system in recent years. It's hard to say whether a fixed exchange rate system is better or whether a floating exchange system is better. A floating exchange rate system offers monetary policy autonomy and the automatic trade balance adjustment. Let's look at the arguments of each. We have seen that the supporters, we have seen the positive and negative sides of both the floating and exchange rate, and the people are not agreed. The scholars, the investors, they are not mutually agreed on the benefit of one system. They are showing the benefits of the both system. Both systems have their positive things and both systems have their negative things. Okay, under a floating exchange rate system, the government could choose to expand the money supply to encourage the people to buy more without worrying about the maintaining parity. But under the fixed exchange rate system, the government does not have its ability because it has to maintain the exchange rate. Okay, but under a floating exchange rate, the trade balance would be automatically corrected. For example, a country is running a trade deficit, buying more than sell. The outflow of money will eventually lead to a depreciation of its country. And this depreciation will make it goods cheaper in foreign market. Imports are expensive, and a trade deficit should eventually correct this. These are the benefit under the floating exchange rate. Mean the trade of balance would occur automatically because of the free exchange rate. The exchange rate will determine because of the market forces, and the trade of balance will occur automatically when the export is higher than import. Then gradually, because of the exchange rate, export will go down and the import will increase, and ultimately the country will get the balance of trade. There is no real agreement as which system is better. We know that the Bretton Woods style fixed exchange rate regime will not work, but a different kind of fixed exchange rate system might be more enduring, could encourage stability that would facilitate more rapid growth in international trade and investment. Okay, what type of exchange rate system is in practice today? Various exchange rate regimes are followed today. 14% of IMF members follow the free float policy, 26% of IMF members follow the managed float system, and 22% of IMF members have no legal tenders of their own, for instance EU zone countries. The remaining countries use less flexible systems such as peg arrangement or adjustable pegs. This is the graphical representation which divides the countries into different floating and fixed exchange rate system. Okay, this is a small case study that we might be do in the next lecture, and you can see this case study. It will be better if you just read this case. This is the case about the rise and fall of the Japanese yen. It's about the fixed exchange rate and how they move from fixed exchange rate to the floating exchange rate system. And what I anticipate from you guys is you are going to be well prepared. You are going to read this case study. It is available in your books, and otherwise you can read from the slides. And there are 2 slides of this case study, and we are going to discuss this case study in the next lecture. Okay. Now let's do the recap of today's lecture. What we had discussed today, we had discussed about the international monetary system, and we under this monetary system we had discussed about the floating exchange rate. First of all, we gold standard, then the fixed exchange rate and the floating exchange rate. The gold standard refers to the system in which countries peg currencies to the gold and guarantee their convertibility. In 1980, most nations followed the gold standards, and In 1944, representation from 44 countries met at Bretton Woods and to design a new international monetary system that would facilitate post-war economic growth, and they developed a fixed exchange rate system. Beside this thing, they have established the two international institutions, the IMF and World Bank. The Bretton Woods system could not work if its currency is the US dollar, which was the main currency. Under speculative attacks, this was a basic assumption under this fixed exchange rate, and it works well only as long as US inflation rate remained low and US did not run a balance of payment deficit. And because of this thing, because of the late 60s, the Vietnam War and the domestic expenditures, the US dollar has to be to devalue, and the overall export level of export was higher of US economy. Because of this thing, currencies in different countries, they started to float their currency freely against the US dollar. It was very difficult for them, it was sort of impossible for those countries to maintain the same exchange rate, fixed exchange rate. A new exchange rate system was established in 1976 at a meeting in Jamaica. And important thing is, which one is better? The floating exchange rate provides the monetary anatomy and automatic trade balance adjustment. These are the two main benefits of the floating exchange rate. But on the other hand, fixed exchange rate, that like we discussed, provide them monetary discipline and minimize speculation and reduce uncertainty. These are the three main important benefits of the fixed exchange rate, and because of these benefits, still some people believe that we should go back to the fixed exchange rate. And in the next lecture we will continue with these monetary systems, and we will do the case study as well. Thank you for today. Allah Hafiz.